Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing some wood DIYs and makeovers. We're going to start out with this little wood shelf thing that I found at the thrift store. I've been looking for something for a spice rack for a little while without having to make one, and this one is going to be perfect. It actually has the little pieces on the edges for a little lip where I can set the spices back behind there. Now this is probably made of pine except for the backside, which was a little bit of a darker honey wood. The rest of the wood was really yellowish orange, which of course I didn't care for, so I'm just going to change this up pretty quickly and turn this into my style. I actually do want this to be a darker wood tone, but I need to tone down that yellowish orange first. So I'm using some wax that I actually made, just using some Waverly clear wax and a little bit of a tannish taupe color acrylic paint. Just add a few drops of that paint into the clear wax to make your own wax. And I'm just going to go around over all of the yellowish orangish wood and use a wet rag and dipping it into that wax that I made. So I went over this once very lightly and let it completely dry. Once it was dry, I realized some of the orangish yellow was still showing through, so I did another very light coat of this over top of it. So once the wax was completely dry, this is what it was looking like. You'll notice I didn't do the backside of this shelf, and that's because it was more of a brownish tone already, so I wasn't worried about any orange or yellow coming through. So now I'm just using a brush and going over this entire thing with some Waverly antiquing wax. And if you're wondering why I just didn't use the antiquing wax to start with, like I said, I needed to get rid of that yellow orange tone on here, because after much experimenting with this antiquing wax, I have figured out that if your wood has a yellow orange tone, then this antiquing wax is going to take on that same tone. And by adding that first layer of a lighter tan color of wax, this wax going over top of it, once you wipe this down, it's going to take on more of that tannish brown color. And since I used a layer of wax under this antiquing wax, it's going to allow me to kind of move that antiquing wax around a little bit and give this a variation of different colors. Now, once it was dry, I wanted to hand paint this, but I am not great at drawing vines. So I'm using this little stencil that I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm not actually going to stencil this. I'm just going to tape this down, and then I will use a pencil and trace inside the stenciling. And I'm just going to do this on the center two pieces that are sticking out. And I know I could have just actually used the stencil and painted that, but like I said, I just wanted this to look hand painted. So once I have the stenciling traced out over those two ledge pieces, I'm going to use some chalk paint in the color moss green with a tiny little liner brush and just go over my pencil marks. And because this is hand painted and traced over, it is not perfect, and both of them just look a little bit different than the other. Once I finished the vining, then I went back in, and you can see I left that little center part open and I didn't do the stencil there. So here I am just painting on some tiny little leaves and little greenery coming out from there, and then I'm going to use some paint that I mixed up to make a pretty light pinkish purple color, and I'm just dabbing this on there really quickly so that I can just make a rose. And honestly, roses are pretty simple to make. You just kind of blob on a little color, and then on top of there you use a liner brush with a darker color and just kind of make little semicircles all over the place. And if you do this while your lighter color is still wet, you can kind of blend these colors in together to make the shadows and the highlights come together on their own. Don't forget, if you haven't already, there's still time to enter the giveaway from my last video to win a free print from my Etsy shop. To enter, just comment art on my previous video and I will be announcing the winner on June 10th. I've also already started adding the Halloween prints to my shop, so those are included in the giveaway. And since y'all have been so sweet and supportive of my new shop, I am choosing 2 winners. So be sure to go to my last video and enter to win. I found these little corbels at the thrift store. They're actually to hold up curtain rods, I believe, but I thought these would be pretty cool as bookends. These are painted a kind of copper and gold mixed together, so I want to make them look like wood. So I am first going in and just doing 1 coat of some Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster just to cover up that reddish gold color. Then once the paint is dry, I'm going in with that homemade wax that I mixed up the clear wax and the light kind of tan taupe color. And I'm using a brush and just going to do 1 coat over both of these, but for this one I am not wiping any of it off. And once that was completely dry, then I'm going to go back in with a thick brush and some of the antiquing wax, and I'm going to go over probably about half of this before wiping it off because I don't want this one to set on there too long. I'm really looking just to get this down into all those crevices and make those a little darker and aged. So I'll just continue working in small sections with the antiquing wax and then wiping it off with a paper towel. Then I mixed up a little bit of antiquing wax with a few drops of black acrylic paint just so I could deepen and darken that antiquing wax a little bit. And I'm going to go over this entire thing while that first round of antiquing wax is still wet. And since it's still wet, I can kind of move this darker antiquing wax around a little bit and blend it in with the rest of it. Or I can concentrate some darker areas in certain spots and still blend them in. So once I finish this, then I'll set these aside and let them completely dry. And to finish them off, I am taking that lighter wax that I made and going over this one more time very lightly just to get some more highlights. For this project, I found this kind of raised butcher block at the thrift store. It's really thick and pretty heavy, and it already had these bun feet on it, so I thought this would be a nice little riser to go into my kitchen. So since this was pretty much raw wood, I didn't have to do anything to really make this look like wood. All I had to do was make this the color that I wanted. So I started out by doing some really streaky marks of the antiquing wax, and then I will use a paper towel and kind of blend that in. Then I go back over top of it and do that same technique, just some streaky antiquing wax all over the place. And again, wipe it off with a paper towel. Then I'm going to go back in with that light colored wax that I made and do a few streaks of that on here. And again, wipe it off with the paper towel. Then I'm going to go in with the darker antiquing wax I made by mixing the antiquing wax with a little bit of black paint, and I will just streak this all over it and then again wipe it off with a paper towel. And I just keep doing this over and over, adding layers and layers and then wiping it off until I am happy with the variation of color. Now my original plan for this was to use the freezer paper hack to put some watercolored roses and little greenery on here. So I did the whole thing. I had a piece of cardstock and I cut my freezer paper down to the size of my cardstock, and then I made a little watercolor thing on Canva and taped this down to my cardstock, ran it through my printer. It printed beautifully, and I think I forgot to make this print like it was printing on photo paper. So this was actually a fail kind of, because once I pressed it down onto here, it did leave some of that ink on here, not all of it. You'll see when I pull this up, even though I tried to be as quick as possible when doing this so the ink wouldn't dry before I flipped it over. I'm not sure if it was my printer's fault, my fault, or just that I had waxed this wood first. But I'm thinking it's because I waxed the wood first, because I've done this on raw wood and it works really well. But for this one, it just didn't work quite as good as I wanted it to. It's hard to tell in the video, but I could see where the picture was. It was just very, very faint. So as you can see, my plan B was just to go over what I could see on here from the picture and just paint it back in. And again, I'm just doing a simple painting of roses and some greenery, so it was pretty simple to do. I just did it the same way that I did on my spice rack. And you can't really mess up roses. You just do some half circles and then go in with variations of the first color that you use, and keep doing those semicircles and blending it in. And like I said, even though the freezer paper didn't work out on here, it did help me to be able to see the picture a little bit. So I just kind of followed those same lines. I think the hardest part about painting this was knowing just when to stop working with it. But once I finally put my brushes down, then I let this dry completely and I sprayed it with 2 coats of an acrylic sealer. For this project, I'm using this glass vial that I got from the thrift store, and it actually fits this thicker wood dowel nicely. This is just one that I got from Amazon, and I cut it down just a little bit to make it shorter, and it actually fits perfectly down in here. For the top of the dowel, I'm just using this little wood piece. I've had this off of something for quite a while. I don't even know where it came from, but it fits the top of the dowel nicely. And then I'm going to use this metal clip from Dollar Tree to make this into a photo holder. To start out, I am painting the vial and both of the other smaller pieces with some black chalk paint, and I'll just do a couple coats of that on there and on the little top piece and the clip part. While that's drying, I am going to move on to that dowel, which again is pine, so it does have a little bit of that yellow orange tinge to it. So to avoid that coming through, I am going over this with that homemade wax that I mixed up the tan color with the clear wax, and I'm just going to brush this on and then wipe it off with a paper towel. Then I'm going to brush on some antiquing wax, and then again just very quickly wipe this off before it dries. And to make this look like aged wood, I'm going to dab on very randomly some of that black wax that I made by mixing the antiquing wax with some black acrylic paint, and again just dabbing this on randomly, then using my paper towel to wipe it off. The little top piece had a notch on the bottom of it, so I ended up having to drill out the top of my dowel so that that could fit down in there. Then I just used some wood glue to attach that top piece down inside of the dowel. And I didn't have to use any glue to put this down into the vial because this dowel just fits down in there really snug. And to finish this off, I just used some gel super glue to attach that clip to the front side of the dowel. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.